So back in, the mid 2000s when you guys were thinking of doing something like this, what made you stick with this title through films? Like, where did this come from? What was the spark of this idea?
Well, this is actually on my family crest. Mm-hmm. So Hamilton is my maiden name, and it dates back to, I guess, the British, I don't know, royalty or whatever in medieval times. And so I saw my family crest on, I was at my uncle's house, and I saw it on the wall, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that through it said it just really small in the title thing. And I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So through just became a cool name that we thought we'd use.
Yeah. For our Texas fans, could you tell us a little bit about the Texas roots? And
yeah, so, well, I have, 7 generations of family that's lived here in Texas, and Marcus is from Austin. Mm-hmm. And so, born and raised, I grew up on a cattle ranch out of South Texas, and my family's still doing that to this day, and I'm the only one that's left to California, and I had my first daughter. It's the first in 7 generations to be born outside of Texas. Yeah.
Not a lot of rodeos out in LA.
Not a whole lot.
There's Rodeo Drive, though.
There's a mechanical bull on Sunset, though, I think.
So I've got to ask, when you guys kicked off through films, you did it with a film that obviously you guys wanted to kick off with. Can you tell us a bit about working with people like Justin and that you were familiar with, and bringing the family into through films and really kicking off the right way? I mean, I felt like it was a perfect film to kind of kick off a Texas brand, if you will.
You want to take that?
Well, sure. I, growing up on the border, was, very familiar with the story itself. Los Encinos is the name of our ranch, and so I wrote and directed, and we produced that. And Justin, who I'd known, he'd been with my agent for years, and I'd known him, and so I was like, hey, do you want to come and act in my first film that I'm directing? He's like, of course. So we put it together, and we took this crew down there to the ranch, and we literally stayed in hunters camps and just had a blast shooting. And I guess it was 8 days, so we covered some ground, and it was a great experience. It was a big first film. I looking back, I probably should just made it into a feature, but it was a great cut your teeth on something new, and it was all about the learning experience. It was Marcus's first film to produce, so we did it all together.
Yeah, it was a fun one for us too, because it felt very Texas, and that was something we wanted to do with it. And then I think that it's even more timely now because the political issues we're seeing now with border.
Yeah.
But it was really important to us at the time just to connect. These are not people on one side or on the other side. These are just human beings, and they all have similar hopes and dreams and heartbreaks. And so we were hoping with that movie just to show that just an imaginary line, as it were, is just that, and that humans are humans regardless of where they're from.
Yeah.
And I think, man, like almost 10 years later now, like that resonates even more now than it ever has, which is striking and kind of disappointing too. But it was a special one for us because we really are drawn to the gritty stuff, like No Country, Winter's Bone, and Frozen River were movies that we saw at the time. We're like, oh my gosh, like we have to find a way to do something like that. So that was our first stab at it.
We're even seeing, like, Pierce Brosnan has a TV show that's about the Texas border, and I mean, it's finally catching up to what you guys were talking about, more than almost a decade now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of crazy. Well, I'd love to kind of talk about when you guys jumped to your next producing choices. Sure. You guys decided on some really intriguing filmmakers. What was your process of kind of figuring out who are we going to go after? Who are we going to look to? Was it something about, Justin and Sean that caught your eye? I mean, what really made them stand out?
Yeah, I think it was, for both of those guys, it was the full package. I think we're very much a story-driven company, so it's always about the screenplay or the vision. And then I think it's also your film can only be as good as the people involved. So, we'd known Justin and Dwayne for a long time, and that just made sense because we knew with that screenplay, we knew exactly what they were going to do with it, because they have that great kind of midnight movie kind of a feel, and there's some great like pulpy moments in that. So on the read, we're like, oh, I know exactly what they're going to do. So that felt really fun. It just felt like a great story to tell for us, and it also is that kind of that rustic, real rugged Western kind of movie. And then with Sean, it was a story that just needed to exist. That's very much what we're about. It's things that just have to be told. And we met with him, and I'll let Karrie tell about that meeting, but we met him right away, and we're like, oh my gosh, these are our people. Like, we have to do this movie. So
Yeah, I mean, when we met him through Mark Duplass, and he said, this guy's he's done 4 features, and he's really somebody I think is gonna break soon, and we really, I think you guys should meet him. And so we met him, and he had this film that he pitched us. I guess it was a 4-page outline of a film, and most of it was pictures. And so when we met with him, he was telling us the story about some of these women that, the struggles of being on the streets in this one corner, in this one area where he lived near. And it's heartbreaking. I was crying in the meeting. It was just such an emotional story, and I felt like no human should be invisible, and I felt like all these women were invisible. People would pass them by and they wouldn't treat them like human, So he was telling us, he was like, this might bring light to a situation that needs, a voice. And I felt that was a really beautiful way to, and he's the perfect person to tell this story. And so, we were on after that meeting. We were like, yeah, let's do this,
Yeah. I think that's the beautiful thing about filmmaking is you're able to shine a light or a spotlight on something. And I remember, the way growing up, how movies affected us, and that was something on this one we didn't know at the time, but that was when we're just, this has to happen. And seeing how it connected with everybody was like truly a dream come true, because it's like when you make a film, you hope it resonates. And the fact that it changed some things in a big way, and that people loved it, was just a really special thing for us. So
When did Sean come about with the idea of thinking, we're going to shoot this on a particular device and we're going to stick to it? And obviously, I mean, I don't want the film to only be known for that, because I think
Sure.
the brilliance of it is amazing. But can you talk about that decision?
Sure.
Producing something that, no one's really seen anything like that. It was a very bold move.
Yeah, I mean, he had kind of done some test footage with the girls with a big camera, and he wasn't feeling like he was getting what he wanted. And so they were inside actually donut time, and the girls were outside, and he saw them just messing around with their phones, filming each other. And so then that's when the idea sparked, maybe we could really access something here. They could be very real they're used to iPhones, for the organic process, because these are non-actors. And so he thought of that idea, and then it's like, well, and the budget, it might really work here, So what they did is did some test footage on an iPhone, and then we went over to Paramount and Technicolor, threw it up on the big screen, and it actually worked. So that was kind of the process of using the iPhone for the film.
Split that money that we saved from a camera over to sound, because we're like, we tested it and it felt right, but obviously when you do a DCP or you do something, you're not entirely sure how it's going to work. So Sean said, like, hey, if we're going to do something experimental with the camera, let's make sure the sound is incredible, because just in case, we want to make sure that experience is there. And luckily both of them turned out great in the end. So
I mean, a group of us made a conscious effort to see this in a theater rather.
Oh, great.
I mean,
Thank
most
you.
of us have to see it screener copies, but we were like, this is going to be something different. It's going to change the game a little bit.
Sure.
Let's see what it looks and sounds like. It was incredible.
Oh, great. Thank you for seeing it in the theater.
Another thing about this film is where you guys were able to go festival-wise with it. It opened up a lot of doors. Can you talk about the festival scene as a whole?
I think just in general, it's a pretty incredible community. I think in a lot of places, just in the regular world, quote unquote, artists are maybe more on the fringe or the dreamers, or they're not taken seriously. I remember when we first got in the business, people were like, well, how long are you going to give it? I was like, well, as long as we can keep the lights on, like, that's what we're going to do. And like, I'll consider that making it. And I think the festival circuit is a band of gypsies that are all in it for the same reasons, and they cheer each other on. And so for us, it's an incredible experience too, because you have access to filmmakers, you have studio people, TV people, indie people, and they're all sharing ideas. They're all talking about what's going on. It's an opportunity to see filmmakers that you love. It's an opportunity to see someone break out that you may not have heard of. So it's an exciting thing for me, and super inspiring. Every time I leave a fest, I'm just like, oh wow, I'm so glad I'm doing this, and I'm so glad I got to be here. So it's been really nice.
So what was Toronto like?
Well, Toronto's incredible. It's one of the nicest festivals. I don't know, everyone in Canada, it really is true. Everyone in Canada is so nice. But it was incredible because I think you're blending some of the indie space with huge, like, star-driven movies, which is a cool feeling to be a part of, because we were a small movie amongst these giants, because that's the start of the awards season, really. And so it was really incredible to be there and be a part of a moment, with that film with Nick and Mark and Rose and Bobby all came in, and Joel as well. So yeah, it was really cool to be just a part of that experience, and it was our first big festival, so that was a lot of fun too. So it was kind of a moment within a moment, but yeah, I love Toronto. It's easy to get in to see things. I mean, it's just a beautiful city, and everyone's so sweet.
The Canadian audiences are great too. Like, they love film, and so like screening something for them is such a pleasure.
Yeah.
Because they really like revel in it. So it was really
and they love Nick Kroll, which was a really great thing, because he has a huge following there, and so everyone was super excited, and in every screening they were really positive and asking a lot of questions, and it was really neat.
We weren't sure because Wheels Ontario, but like we weren't sure how that was going to play, but it's huge in Canada, so that worked out great. I guess it's like Aggie jokes. Like, I think Aggie's like Aggie jokes more than anybody else.
Yeah. I was like, that could be offensive, but no, they loved it.
So as far as with these last couple films, you guys have gotten award recognition. And I mean, that's got to be kind of crazy. You guys are relatively new producers, but yet you guys are now award winners. It's tell us a bit about that experience.
It was pretty unreal. I think you just being included in that conversation was incredible, and I think to our point earlier, the fact that people liked the films enough to recognize them or nominate them is, I think, just a symbol of what the movie meant to people. And I think for us, we got into the business to connect with people. It's how you feel, or sitting in a dark room and sharing an experience. That's really like what we love. And so the fact that experience was so great that people wanted to recognize it was incredible. So I mean, I think when we were in New York for the Gothams, sitting around with there's Oscar winners and these just incredible filmmakers and wonderful actors and actresses, and we're just like, wow, this is really pretty surreal. Like, we shot a tiny little movie, and there's Helen Mirren. That's pretty cool.
And Julianne Moore.
Yeah, it was really wonderful, and I think it does open doors. I think as everybody's fighting so hard to get credibility in the business, I think it's access and credibility, and playing a festival or getting nominated or winning an award gives you that. And I think that really matters so much, because you're able to connect with these people and collaborate on a deeper level. And I think at the end of the day, that's better stories come from that, and that obviously helps the company. So
yeah. And I also feel like because Tangerine was It really was kind of like a David and Goliath story where we were just the smallest film that I think people had ever heard of, and to be going into even awards talks with these giants, it really was awesome to be included in that conversation. And then it was great that Maya got some recognition at, the Spirit Awards. It's just amazing because she went from, obscurity and living a hard life to almost a year later getting a Gotham and Independent Spirit Award. It's the opportunity there was it is a Cinderella story. So
did you ever think you guys went on with a mission to show many different people? Did you ever think you would reach that level and that type of audience? You guys got showcased because you showed the audience in particular people maybe no one had really kept an eye on.
Yeah, I think going into it, we were just wanting to shoot a movie that was a great movie telling this. Sean's really great about capturing a moment in time of maybe some areas where people have overlooked. And he's done that in just about every one of his films, Prince of Broadway and Tangerine. And he really is able to capture that in such a empathetic, great way. He wanted to be authentic. And so that means telling a story with a bunch of different characters. And, I think that he's able to really thread that needle where it's real. And I think people really wanted to experience what it was like to be there, and I think he was able to capture a bit of that. Like, this is a day in the life, of these two gals, and he did that with Prince of Broadway. He's done that, with just about all of his films.
He does. He catches things right before they disappear. In Prince of Broadway, there's that kind of bootlegged strip of Broadway, and I think a year or two after he shot the movie, they cracked down on that and closed it. And now Donut Time's no longer there, and there's condos going up in the area. And so his movies are, I think, for us, not only just beautiful stories, but they're great time capsules. They capture a moment and a place that very often in his movies' cases no longer exist a couple years after. So that's for me special and kind of nostalgic in a way. But I think, to go back to your question, is we didn't know who was going to watch the movie. We didn't know what was going to happen to it. We just knew that it was a beautiful story, and we knew that Sean had the talent to tell it, and we were willing to go on that ride with him, whatever it looked like. And we were just beyond thrilled that it did what it did. And I think the lesson for me was, it's like, don't, from a production or a finance or a business side, you have to try to quantify it. You have to track it to a certain degree. But the big lesson on that movie was there's not a lot you can do. And I think that's the big issue in the studios now. It's like, that's why they're going to the tent pole, because it's harder to track. So the lesson for us is just make a beautiful movie and hope for the best. Doesn't mean you don't do your math, but I think that's the end of my guessworking.
Well, and honestly, if you're looking at it from a finance perspective, it was a very risky investment. And so no one, we were all there making something that we thought needed to be told and have a voice. But I feel like anyone looking at that would be like, oh, that's a horrible investment. Why are you doing that? But some of those stories just hit a moment in time where it resonated with everybody, and we were so lucky to be a part of that.
You brought up Mark earlier, and I think both those wonderful brothers have impacted a lot of people's lives. Can you talk about being impacted by Mark and his team, and also how that's kind of led to maybe a resurrection in particular in places like Austin and smaller locales that can film, and seeing Sean do stuff in the middle of nowhere? I mean, it's changing the game.
Yeah. I'll let
Yeah, 100%. I think when we were at South by a couple years ago with Adult Beginners, Mark delivered a keynote, which we saw, and then I've also watched it a couple times online since then. And basically, he says you just have to forge your own path. The way digital is now, the way that we have access, there's so many distributors. It's never been easier to make a movie. It's still really hard to make a movie, but it's never been easier than it is today. And so I think that resonates with the community on a huge level, and it certainly resonated with us. Because I think that's really, we're in a risk-adverse business. I mean, they all are, but especially this one. So there needs to be some sort of proof in the pudding. So whether you're a writer or an actor, a producer, or director, if you're able to come in there and show them something, I think that makes all the difference in the world. Otherwise, it's a really long and kind of tangled path. And I still think it can be if you're shooting your own stuff, but I think that idea of just going out and doing it is huge. And I think we've seen over the past few years some really incredible filmmakers coming onto the scene that are just like, I just grabbed a camera and started shooting stuff. And the kind of talent that these people have, if they'd gone the traditional route trying to get into an agency or trying to approach a traditional finance company, they might not have gotten the movie made. So I think just in that realm, they've been incredibly influential. And for us, they've been great because we met them on Adult Beginners, and they have incredible taste, and they're champions for kind of the small guy, which is great because I think a lot of the stories that we're drawn to and the indie community are drawn to are not super wide 3,000 screen stories. So finding a way to tell those stories at a price is important. And I think if you're able to do that at a price, you really get to tell whatever story you want. That's true for Kicks and for Tangerine and all of these movies. So I think it's been a huge impact, and we've been really fortunate to know them and work with them and call them friends.
You know, we haven't talked as much about Kicks. Can you give us a little bit of some insight into that? I think that's also something that is special in its own right.
Well, I actually let him say that. He loves shoes. So
yeah, I'm a sneakerhead, so that one. But our friend David Kaplan sent that to us. We had a dinner with him, and he's like, "What are you guys looking for?" I was like, we're looking for something gritty, something just wild, like we've never seen, something that just resonates deeply when you read it." And he's like, "Oh, I know exactly what you want." So he sent us Kicks, and we actually weren't able to do it at the time. We were tied up with some other projects, but 6 months later, we circled back, and they're like, "Yes, we're still we're putting it together." So we came on board, and Josh and Justin are great, and the screenplay is just beautiful. And so we shot it up in the Bay, and it was an incredible experience. I think it was, especially an indie film, because you're small enough and you have to be small. It was really important to us to reach out to the community and give respect to the community, because it was a story about the East Bay, and it was very cool and touching, because I think a lot of the bigger productions that had shot here that did not do that and maybe didn't have to in their mind, but for us, they were incredible. Like, we had crowds out watching us and cheering for us. So we had access to incredible locations, and I think you see in the final product, it's a really special film that hits that delicate East Bay note. You know, we're obviously from Texas, but everything that I know about the Bay, I think we did justice to them on that movie. So,
what's it like being able to be showcased at a festival like this that honors the story, first of all, but also honors the people behind the story, not necessarily the people that are front and center? I mean, it's the writers, it's the producers, it's the people that are wearing multiple hats. I mean, it must be nice, to come home, but to be honored in a festival like this, that's looking at the full meat of what you guys do.
Well, I mean, I guess we wouldn't be here if it weren't for the story and for the writers. You know, I think that I think it's overlooked kind of a lot in that sense that so many people are focused on one section of a film, you know, the look or maybe even the actors, but the story's where it's at, you know, and if you don't have a great story, you can't have a great film. And it's said so many times, but I think that Austin Film Festival really focuses on that, and I really like that they're bringing in writers and people that these are the next, you know, level of stories, you know, people who we may work with, and I think it's really cool to be a part of something like that that honors that within the festival. And then also, they get to see behind the scenes of what actually goes into making a film, which I think is so important because, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that aren't on that screen. But it's, 2 years with a project at least. So you want to love it. You want to be passionate about it. And it starts with talking about how that came to be, and I think this is a great festival to talk about that.
I don't want to ask, what's next, but I really do.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, yeah, we've got a handful of things that we're working on. Michael Telly, who's an Austin-based filmmaker, who's an incredible director. We had the privilege of working with him on his most recent feature called Don't Leave Home, and Karrie had a role in that one. And we just are picture locked, finishing up some final things. So we're going to be sending that one out for the festival circuit next year. And then Behold My Heart is a film that Joshua Leonard directed that we did with Marissa Tomei and Timothy Oliphant, Mireille Enos, and Charlie Prumler, who just won an incredible award at Venice, and he's in Ridley Scott's new movie. And so we're screening that next week for buyers. So we're super excited about that movie. It's a touching movie about family and grief and just how to move forward after something challenging or devastating happens. So it checked those boxes for us, where it was female driven, it was gritty, but it left you feeling inspired, not empty. So those are two features that we're excited about. And then we've got two television series that we're currently developing, and should be taking those out this fall sometime. So,
and then he has a short that he directed. So Marcus is now venturing into directing, and he's been writing. And so he filmed his first short this past month, September, and I starred in it, and it was a lot of fun. So he's now trying on new hats.
Yeah, we're almost finished in post on that one. And Beth Grant, Beth Grant, who's in Donnie Darko and No Country for Old Men, and Mindy Project was in it, and then another incredible actor, Irene Rosine, who's been in a ton of things like Star Trek and LA Confidential. So we had an incredible cast, three women, so kind of kept with our gritty female-driven theme again. So it's been fun. I really enjoyed stepping into that role.
So I guess the kind of last question, I mean, you guys are obviously immersed in what's coming and know a lot of the fresh new perspectives that are hopefully going to be showcased. But what do you guys do, TV shows? What do you guys watch at home? What do you read? Like, what are you guys looking to just to entertain your own selves that aren't just looking for gems? But what do you guys like to do?
Well, honestly, we're big Game of Thrones fans. I cannot miss a Game of Thrones episode. And of course, the last one, I was just, I can't wait till next season. But I mean, we're all over the place as far as we try to consume as much as we can. Having a child now, it makes it a little more interesting. But I mean, I love Noah Hawley. Fargo is a really great show. It's an incredible show. I mean, really, it's just as much as we can take in, we can. I mean, I love Veep. It's just kind of like all over the place. We don't have we have to watch this genre, but we like just about everything we can see.
It's harder to get to the theater now with a little one, but so we haven't seen Blade Runner yet, but Denis Villeneuve is incredible. Like Sicario and Prisoners and Arrival are all movies that we love, and Mad Men was a series that I just absolutely loved. And so we try to stay pretty in touch with as much as we can, whether it's big glossy stuff, which I love, and then really small gritty indie stuff we love. And then I think we were reading a lot of scripts, and we still are, but we're trying to read a little bit more literature. So like Motel Chronicles, Sam Shepard's book, I broke that out, and the Poetic Edda, I started digging through that. So just trying to keep horizons open and finding inspiration everywhere.
Yeah, and I will say, like, we still, we have a friend that he wrote and produced Menashe, and like still those kind of, we of course want to support all of our indie buddies and the people that are have films coming out this year. So we try to get to the theater as often as we can to support people with films.
Florida Project.
Yeah.
You got to see Florida Project. So.
Yeah, I got to support Sean. So yeah, it's just we try to get there as much as we can.
Well, guys, it was a real pleasure. I mean, I've seen your name so often in films. I'm like, who are these folks? And so it was a real pleasure. I mean, I've been kind of hunting you guys, wanting to see if, and I just saw that you're going to be back in Austin. I was like, I've got to get these two before they blow up big and take 3 films to somewhere next level. So thank you guys for sitting down with us.